So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third presentation in our County Parks Feature Series, talking about South Park and Round Hill Park. My name's Amy Miller, and I'm the Watershed Specialist for the Allegheny County Conservation District. Like I said, tonight is our third of 4 webinars featuring our 9 Allegheny County parks. The date for the last webinar on the series is on your screen. It'll be later this month and feature Heartwood Acres, Deer Lakes, and Harrison Hills parks. If you've missed any of our previous webinars in the series and would like to view them, they've been recorded. It can be found in our Educational Resources tab on the Conservation District's website. If you haven't attended one of these, each session introduces the parks, discusses their history, any not to be missed features at that park, and some recent park improvement projects that ACCD has been involved in. As I mentioned, webinars are recorded, and we are recording this one this evening, so it can be viewed in the future. We'll also provide the link to that recording in a follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. In addition, that email will have more resources and a survey that we'd like for you to fill out. ACCD and Parks both strive to provide programming that meets the needs of our audience, so if there's something you want to know about, please let us know through the survey. We will have a question and answer session after each park's presentation. So if you have a question, you can go ahead and type it in the chat box that is typically at the bottom center of your screen. And either myself or my coworker, Rebecca, will make sure your question gets asked. Joining us this evening, we have 2 of the Allegheny County Park Rangers, Elise and Braden. The Allegheny County Park Rangers are the ambassadors to our parks. Elise and Braden, they represent ideas of conservation and stewardship of our natural resources. They also provide park visitors with information and ensure that parks regulations are being followed. Park Rangers offer educational and interpretive programming in the parks, as well as to local schools and communities like this presentation tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Elise and Braden.
Hi, everybody. This is Braden Miter.
And this is Elise Cups.
And we are going to get started this evening talking about South Park. And let us share our screen here and get our presentation up. All right, great. So thanks, Amy. And as Amy mentioned, we do a lot of different things in the Allegheny County Parks. So our primary focus is education. We do public educational programs. Elise manages our outreach division. So we visit schools, libraries, homeschool groups, other civic organizations, whether we're going to them and bringing programming or having them come to our parks for programming. And that includes events like this where we're doing presentations online for you all who are our visitors tonight. But in addition to that, we work with a lot of conservation projects. We do tree plantings, riparian restorations. The park rangers are in charge of the trail management and volunteer management in our parks. So we're doing trail maintenance, trail design, whether it's layout or decommissioning old trails and building new trails. We're involved in just about every aspect of the parks. But as I said, today we're going to talk about South Park and Round Hill. And so we are going to start off with an overview here of all 9 of the county parks, if you're not familiar. We have over 12,000 acres in the Allegheny County Park System. You can see all of our 9 parks here. So more than likely, no matter where you live in Allegheny County, there's probably a park within a 30-minute drive of your home. And so that's North Park, Deer Lakes, Heartwood Acres, Harrison Hills, Boyce Park, White Oak, Round Hill, South Park, and Settlers Cabin. So South Park is the second biggest park in the county park system. It's over 2,000 acres, the largest being North Park. They were first developed in 1927. The idea came about to create these 2 regional parks first by E.V. Babcock, who was a county commissioner. And the idea to create the parks really wasn't that popular of an idea when they first decided upon doing it, and they couldn't gain a bunch of support. And that was because the parks were so far outside of the city limits. And they said, why are people from the city going to come to these parks? And if you've been to North Park and South Park today, you know that it was a pretty good idea that they came up with, because people from all over the city and all over the county, and even outside of the county, are coming to visit these parks. So thankfully, based on the vision of E.B. Babcock, he took the initiative and purchased all of the original 4,000 acres of parkland in North Park and South Park with his own money, and then sold it to the county at cost, which gave that initial spur to get the parks being developed. They were originally determined to be what they called the People's Country Club, to allow the everyday person to kind of escape the city life and get out into nature and have some recreation that oftentimes couldn't be afforded by just the common everyday working man. There we go. So the story really started after E.B. Babcock acquired the land, sold it to the county, and the parks were inaugurated in June 18th of 1927. And the original park manager, the original park director was also a landscape architect. His name was Paul Rees. He was from Switzerland, and he was also a conservationist, and he was really idolized the idea of the national park system that came out very recently. The National Park Service was dedicated only about a decade before the county parks came to be in Allegheny County. So Rees really looked at those western parks in the United States whenever he was designing North and South Park. And if you've ever been to North and South Park, you may see some of the things that he was really trying to exemplify in the parks. He practiced an a landscape artistic style of prairie style architecture, which was taking the natural landscape, large stones, timbers, and things that you would find, incorporating them into the design and creating a artificial yet naturalistic landscape that just seemed like it had always been there. And so two of the big things that we see in South Park that represent this style and Rees's architectural design were the Cascades, which we see on the left, and the Vale of Cashmere, which we see on the right. Both of them were water features. The Cascades were more of a wading pool and a place for people to come and cool off in the summer heat. As you can see, it was very popular in the 1930s and up into the 1960s whenever it was closed down. And the Vale of Cashmere was more of a relaxing, reflecting pool area where you might come and have a little picnic on the side of the pools. Today they look a little bit different. On our right, we see the Vale of Cashmere is still there. It is now in more of a wooded landscape as the area has grown up around it. We are currently working on a project with the Allegheny County Parks Foundation and with some large donors like the Penguins Foundation to do some restoration in these areas. So on our left, we have an artistic rendering of what the Cascades will look like as we are currently in the process of restoring them and getting water running through them again. We're hoping that that project is going to be construction starting next year and hopefully finished by the end of next year. Now the Vale of Cashmere, it's a little more challenging because the original water flow was coming from the stream that was next to the Vale. So that probably will never have water flow through it again, but we will do things like stabilizing and restoring the stones. We've had volunteers working for the past few years on cleaning them off and exposing them so that you can see what it looked like. And we may do something like in the center pool, we can see it's full of soil that may be graded out and planted with a different variety of wildflowers. So it might be bright blue, Virginia bluebells in the springtime to give it kind of the appearance of water, and then waving, shallow grasses throughout the rest of the year. Some of the other historic sites in South Park that you can see and really made the park, a special place to visit and still do. On our top left here, we have the Oliver Miller Homestead. Now, this was built in the early 1700s. You can't see the original portion of the house in this picture, and really the original portion of the house doesn't exist as it would have. It would have started out as a log house, timber framed, and then eventually they would have replaced the log parts with stone parts and then built the two sections onto the front of the house that we see today. This is a really neat site, not only with the stone house. On the site, there's also an original spring house. There's a recreated log house to see what the original house may have looked like. There's a barn, a woodworking shop, and a blacksmith shop, all managed by the Friends of the Oliver Miller Homestead. Normally, you can come check that out May through December on Sundays where they do tours. They can take you inside the house, show you how blacksmithing was done, and really tell you what life was like in the early to late 1700s on really what was the frontier of Western Pennsylvania. On our top right, we have an image of the fairgrounds. You can still see the fairgrounds museum building with the clock tower today, but the fairgrounds look a little bit different. When they were originally developed in the 1930s, they were built to have agricultural fairs and exhibits here. They would have sometimes over 500,000 people visiting them each year and a variety of exhibits on this 200-acre site. Today, while the main structures still exist, there have been some changes. There's still the dirt track around the outside, but now it's a gravel track that's made for running and jogging and walking. And the interior of the field is now baseball fields, a couple baseball fields, and some can be converted for football field use. So it's a great sports facility. And on either side of the sort of the valley where it's set down in, there were bleachers which have been removed. The near side to our park office has been turned into meadow, and the far side we recently last year actually did a reforestation planting and planted over 300 trees on what used to be the old bleachers on the hillside. We'll take a look on our bottom left here. We have an image of the original swimming pool at South Park. This was a very unique structure. It followed along Paul Reese's design of the naturalistic prairie style landscape. You can see the boulders in the background, and if we were viewing it from the other side of the pool, you can see the entire side of the pool edge was surrounded by these stones sticking out into the water. It actually had a natural sand beach and waterfalls flowing in off some of the stones. So it really made a great naturalistic swimming area. And that was in use again until about the 1960s. And then they constructed the current wave pool that South Park has today for everyone's swimming needs. And then lastly, sort of the real country club aspect of South Park is on the bottom right is an image of the South Park Golf Course. The South Park Golf Course has a sister golf course in North Park. They were both parts of the original design. In order to give folks that might not be able to afford to go to the fancy country club a place to come play golf at a cheap rate on a very nice course. And it's still a very affordable, inexpensive course today, and we have it open most of the year. And then South Park, while some of those things were in the past, is still a great place to come check out today. And keeping up with the times, we've invited a lot of different modern recreation into our parks. We have a variety of trails throughout our parks. There's that are all shared equally by hikers, bikers, and equestrians. So if you're looking for a place to hike, there are miles and miles of trails in South Park. We're currently working on doing a lot of redesign and reblazing to make them more navigable by the public. And if you're interested in getting out there, we have the Allegheny County Parks Trails app to find our trails easier and see where you are on the trails. But then we also do a variety of things like our summer concert series, which unfortunately this year we weren't able to host, but we do have that on the CW. We're having our concerts, and then we also have the Parks Unplugged, which we take a variety of artists out into our parks to various places and sort of have little acoustic sessions with them. It's really neat. You can find it really easily on YouTube if you look at Allegheny County Parks Unplugged. We have a really nice skate park, concrete bowls and a vert ramp. We have a BMX track that's used for a national championship BMX race. And we have a fantastic ice rink that was just redesigned in the past couple years. It is a full-size NHL-style rink to play on, and we do hockey classes and things like that. And then we have a skate trail that was recently developed. So it's kind of more of a naturalistic flow with some trees and stuff planted around it. So if you're in for some winter sports, it's a great place to check out. And then lastly, the must-see part of our park and one of our most unique features are our bison herd. Now, our bison have been around for quite some time. Back in the 1930s, our bison were purchased, 36 bison originally, from Trexler Farm in eastern Pennsylvania. It's actually now Trexler Game Preserve, which is part of the Lehigh Valley Zoo. And you can probably go see some of the bison that are ancestors of the original bison herd in North and South Park there today if you travel out to the Poconos. They brought those 36 bison here via caravan, put about half in each North Park and South Park. And at the time originally, and again, this kind of pairs with that idea of the fascination with the American West. The parks actually brought in Blackfeet Indian to come and help care for the bison. So while that kind of started out for a while, the Blackfeet Indian eventually decided they were going to leave and the park was going to manage the bison herd. In the 1940s, the North Park herd was combined with the South Park herd, and we no longer have bison in North Park, but we do still have a healthy herd that you can come see in South Park today at the South Park Game Preserve. And this summer, we actually had 3 female calves born. We usually have baby bison every year. And the way that we keep our herd fresh and have good DNA in them is we trade them from other farms. So we'll buy, sell, and trade bison to keep our genetic pool very good in South Park. So if you're coming out to South Park, make sure you stop at the Game Preserve. It's right off Corrigan Drive, and you can see our bison any time of the year. And now we are going to stop sharing our screen, and Amy is going to pick up and take over for her section of the presentation.
Thank you, Elise and Braden. Let me get my presentation back up. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some projects that ACCD has been involved in these parks. First, I'm going to talk about a couple of riparian buffer projects that we completed at South Park. So to talk about riparian buffers, first we need to know what riparian buffers are. So you may hear streamside used in place of riparian. So a riparian or streamside buffer is the strip of vegetation that runs alongside a waterway. And as we've talked about buffers previously in this series, I thought I would talk a little bit about a specific type of streamside buffer called a multifunctional buffer. Multifunctional buffers provide the same stream benefits and functions as traditional buffers, but multifunctional buffers provide the opportunity to produce perennial crops of fruits, nuts, woody florals, and things like that. So if you look at this diagram, you'll see that like traditional buffers, there are 3 zones, starting closest to the stream with zone 1, which is typically unmanaged forests. Zone 2 can consist of fruit and nut trees, and zone 3 consists of more woody florals and those herbaceous plants. As I mentioned, zone 1 is the first 15 feet typically of a multifunctional buffer. It's planted with native riparian species that protect stream banks, control water temperature, improve aquatic habitat, and perform all of those environmental services that traditional buffers do. Zone 2 extends typically the next 15 to 30 feet and can consist of fruit and nut trees. Native fruit and nut trees produce edible fruits that can be eaten raw or used in a variety of other ways in products such as jams, jellies, wines, nut butters, etc. And then zone 3 extends beyond that and consists of woody florals and other herbaceous plants that could be used as cuttings and floral arrangements or to make wreaths for decorative purposes. So in multifunctional buffers, zones 2 and 3 are designed to provide an opportunity to harvest and manage for products. So one of the most common questions that I get about buffers is what species do we plant? So in our buffers, we tend to plant about 15 species. And I can provide a list of those species that we've used in the follow-up email. But here are some examples for each zone of species that we've planted. In zone 1, we use a lot of native trees and shrubs that you would find naturally in our surrounding streams, such as sycamore, river birch, red osier dogwood, willows, spicebush, buttonbush, swamp white oak, things like that. For zone 2, we've planted hazelnut, elderberry, mulberry, chokeberry, pawpaw, hickory, chokecherry, serviceberry, lots of berries. And then and each of these produce an edible nut or flower that could be used by both humans and wildlife. So finally, in Zone 3, we've planted species like witch hazel, redbuds, winterberries, dogwoods, things that I call these the pretty trees that have kind of those flowers that look really pretty, or berries that look really pretty, that you could use in floral arrangements. So if you're planning to do something like this, which I encourage you highly to do, there are several things to consider when choosing a tree species. And these are a couple of the things that I look at when I'm designing buffers. Is the site sunny or shady? So while all plants need some amount of sunlight, some species do really well in shady areas versus sunny areas. Is your site consistently wet or dry? While some species prefer consistently wet root systems, there are species, these are the species that are typically planted closest to the stream, but it could be wet further away from the stream too that you need to make those considerations for. Utility lines, both those you can see and those you can't. Underground and overhead utility lines can impact not only where you can plant, but also what species you're able to plant. If you have overhead lines, you may be able to plant under them. Just keep your species to those that are shorter, maybe plant or short shrub height. And then somewhat related to that is thinking about the tree or shrub's height at maturity. So when you're planting it, it's typically, you know, a foot or a couple feet tall, but depending on the species, they can grow to over 75 feet. So now that we know a little bit about what goes into planting buffers, let's take a look at the buffers ACCD planted in South Park. So we've planted in several different areas of South Park. The whole area totals about probably 3 acres with a little over 600 trees. As you can see from the map, there are a couple areas along Corrigan Drive here. This is the kind of main entrance to the park. The skating rink is around here. So this first area is up by the entrance. And as you go down Corrigan Drive, you hit the roundabout. This is by the Grant Shelter, if you're familiar with that area. And then we have a little bit across the street, just below that, Oliver Miller Homestead. And these are all along Catfish Run. And then we also have a buffer planted on the southern end of the park, down by Sleepy Hollow, along Sleepy Hollow, the stream. As I said, we typically use about 15 species of mixed trees and shrubs. We don't plant too many herbaceous plants, but you can also plant those too. And we couldn't do any of these plantings without support from obviously county parks, as they're not only the landowners, but we've had a lot of help from park rangers, kind of public works employees, and the people that manage the parks, but also other project partners like the Parks Foundation, Peters Creek Watershed Association, local municipalities, and perhaps the most important, volunteers. We can't plant all these trees by ourselves. So that is a little bit about riparian buffers in South Park. So let's talk, see if anybody has any questions about anything that either I or the county park rangers, Elise and Braden, have talked about this evening.
Anybody's welcome to put questions into the chat. At this point, we don't have any questions.
Okay, we can readdress questions at the end of the presentation too. So if you think of something along the way, feel free to put it in there. So moving on, I'm going to talk about some best management practices that we've installed at Round Hill Park. Specifically, 3 best management practices that are either very recently or very soon to be installed. I'm sure the park rangers are going to talk more about this, but for anyone that's unfamiliar, Round Hill Park is a working exhibit farm operation. So I'm going to talk about some agricultural related best management practices. So what does that mean? Well, we already talked about one type. Riparian buffer is an agricultural best management practice. It's also just a general watershed best management practice. But in general, conservation practices, frequently called best management practices or BMPs, are tools used to reduce soil and fertilizer runoff, properly manage animal waste, and protect waters and air quality on the farm while achieving multiple positive environmental outcomes. So the first practice I'm going to talk about is a spring development, and it's basically just how it sounds, developing a natural spring or seep into a usable water source for livestock. Natural springs and seeps can create a muddy mess in pastures when you combine livestock with them, which results in sediment flowing into streams and downstream, causing siltation. But when properly developed, springs can provide a clean, safe drinking water source for livestock and reduce sediment. I apologize, the picture is a little blurry on the slide, but to do this, basically, you collect the water from that spring or seep into a pipe so that it can then flow into a watering trough for your animals. There are many benefits to installing this type of BMP. It reduces sediment flowing into streams by providing stabilized watering areas and removing that spring seep from the pasture. It provides free year-round water source for livestock that's cool in the winter, and it won't freeze in the, or cool in the summer and won't freeze in the winter because it comes from underground. It usually maintains the same temperature year-round. And then it improves the overall health of your livestock to keep them out of that muddy area and promote drinking. The next two BMPs are related to improving water quality and aquatic habitat within the duck pond at the entrance to Round Hill Park. Historically, the pond has had some issues with sedimentation and algae growth that have likely resulted from nutrients and sediment pollution from agricultural and stormwater runoff. To improve the water quality of the duck pond and downstream Douglas Run, which the pond discharges to, we're working to install some aeration and vegetation improvement to the pond. So we improved aquatic habitat with these are 3 artificial floating islands. They are installed and you can see them in the pond. They were installed actually last year. The duck pond, not surprisingly, is home to many ducks and geese, as well as fish and probably some turtles and several other aquatic organisms. There are several benefits to floating islands that include reducing nutrients. The plant root systems extend below that island, as you can see in this rendering, and they'll take up nutrients to be used by the plants. And this creates new habitat both above and below the island and reduces suspended sediments, which were all goals of this overall project. And finally, in conjunction with the floating islands, we wanted to add more oxygen to the water. So 2 diffusers were added just a few weeks ago to the pond, as well as a fountain, which you can see here, to add oxygen. This will help decrease that algae growth and increase decomposition of things like leaves that fall in the pond and prevent sediment buildup by continually circulating the water. So that is our project at Round Hill Park. So I'm going to turn it back over to Elise and Brayden to go over some other aspects of Round Hill Park itself.
I'm going to go ahead and reshare. our screen really quickly. So Round Hill is one of our 7 regional parks, and it is just over 1,000 acres. I mean, if you can remember back to the county parks map in the beginning, it is found in the very southern tip of Allegheny County in Elizabeth. And Round Hill, as Amy mentioned, is a working exhibit farm, and historically, it has been a farm. In 1778, Joseph Piers bought the land that is now the park, the cemetery next to it, and the church. Those are no longer parts of the park, but at one point in time, all of that land was one farm. And the property actually passed down through the next 7 generations before it was purchased from the county. It was purchased in 1968 and then opened a few years later as one of our 7 regional parks. And in this picture, you can see Joseph's son Elisha and his wife and son, and the house in the picture is still part of the farm today. But the big aspect of the farm is the different animals that live there that you can come and visit. So there are a variety of animals. There are some information signs about the animals that live there, and you can walk through the barns and around the farm and see the different animals that are there and learn a little bit about how they contribute to farm life. One interesting fact is that the horses that are at Round Hill are actually retired police horses. So once the police horses retire, they get to go to Round Hill to live out the rest of their life. And Round Hill also has a few other features as well. So in the top left-hand corner, there is a splash pad or splash park that is barn themed at Round Hill. Next, Amy mentioned the duck pond that is very, very popular for people to sit at and to view the ducks that are there. And on the bottom left-hand side, there are different trails and roads at Round Hill that you can walk, bike, that you can horse ride. Some of them even go past some of the pastures so that you can look at the animals. And in the bottom right-hand corner is a picture of one of the meadows at Round Hill. Round Hill actually has a couple of different meadows, and they are planting more. One of them is mainly brown-eyed and black-eyed Susan. One of them is sunflowers, and they're going to be adding additional ones in the next year or 2. But the must-see main thing at Round Hill is definitely the animals that are there. There are several different kinds of animals, and recently the Allegheny County Parks Foundation added informational signs just to let you know a little bit more about the animals, what they contribute to the farm, why those types of animals are there. But you can go ahead and walk around the farm any day during the year and check out the different animals that are there and get maybe a little up close and personal with all of the adorable animals that are there on the farm. So we can go now to any questions that anybody might have, whether it be about South Park or about Round Hill.
Thanks, everybody. That was fascinating. At this point, we do not have any questions in the chat box, but if anybody wants to take a stab before we close, please feel free to do so.
I'll just mention as an aside, we do also have a multifunctional buffer planted at Round Hill Park. It starts at the entrance, and then there's a couple areas as you proceed up the main road where you'll see some relatively newly planted trees.
Hi guys, I joined really late. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and you may have already covered this because I did join really late. I was coming back from a program. Did you talk about the Cascades at South Park?
Yes.
Okay, I'll catch up on and watch it later. So thank you very much.
Did you have any specific questions about them?
Yeah, besides reading that they existed and that they're supposed to be coming back, my question was just where is that? I want to see it. When is it supposed to happen? But if you already talked about it, I'm sorry.
No, I can give you a little bit more information. We didn't go into too much detail about the location, but if you're looking to see the Cascades, they are located almost in the center of the park where the roundabout is. Traveling north on the roundabout, you would take the first right, and you will see the Oliver Miller Homestead. You can park in the same parking lot as the Oliver Miller Homestead, and they are just up the hill. There's Stone Manse Shelter. And the Cascades are, fully in view. It's a massive stone structure. And if you go back and watch the presentation, you'll be able to see a picture of them. Actually, can we just click back through ours? We'll just click back through ours really quick and show it to you since we have ours up. But this is the artist's drawing of what they will hopefully look like on the left-hand side here. We had a groundbreaking last year, and we've been going through the process of securing the money through the Allegheny County Parks Foundation, to which the Penguins Foundation has been a significant donor to. And we're hoping that construction will begin next year and looking for completion at this site, hopefully by the end of next year. In coordination with that, there's going to be a 1.5 mile nature trail that links the Cascades to the Vale of Cashmere, which you can see on the right. It will not be fully restored and functioning with water flowing through it like the Cascades, but there'll be an interpretive trail there over the next couple of years that will have bridges and boardwalks through kind of this low stream valley. So the whole project is probably going to come into fruition over the next 3 years, with hopefully the most major construction on the Cascades completing next year.
I am in awe of all of the things that the foundation has supported and done. They're just huge projects that are really fun to visit.
Yeah, they've done some great stuff, and hopefully we have some more big ones coming up in the future.
I have a question. What's the likelihood of the South Park pool being restored to its former glory, or maybe near former glory?
They've done a couple feasibility studies for it to see what what could be done with it. Essentially, what it comes down to is, I think there needs to be a vision decided upon. They've talked about revamping it into a usable facility for events, into sort of a nature center. It's gone through a lot of changes since it was a pool. They filled it in, they've asphalted over the pool area and had a mini golf course and go-kart track there for a while. So the site has really, it's taken a hit as far as the structural integrity, probably, and would require massive renovation. So I'm not sure when or if that would be a possibility, that there would be restoration to the site, but it has been looked at as far as what are some different possibilities for it. So it's definitely not out of the question. It's just kind of, can we find a suitable use for it and funding to get that suitable use to come together.
And it is being used as a small garden center currently, part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks so much, everybody, for joining tonight, and thank you to you, Braden and Elise, for setting aside time. We're so grateful to learn about the parks, and look for a follow-up message from us for resources and a link to this presentation.
We also hope you're able to join us on October 29th for our final webinar in this series on Heartwood Acres, Deer Lakes, and Harrison Hills Parks. And with that, I hope you all get out and enjoy our awesome county parks. Thank you for listening.